let me first ask a more general question on your experience that you made during the 13 years, I think, in China. Right. When you come back to Europe, what are the main learnings that you brought over?
It's a good question. So I get this question quite a lot, and then I think for me the biggest insight, or the things that I take away, is that there's so many different ways to think about innovation, organizing, thinking about the challenges that we face here in Europe, digital transformation challenges. And I think there's so many different ways that we haven't really explored yet. And I think sometimes when we look at China, we look at examples from the Asia part, I think there's a lot of interesting lessons that we can learn. And maybe not all of that will work in the rest of the world, but I think it's very worthwhile to have a look and to see what kind of best practices we can take away. Sometimes I say maybe we can copy China. That would be nice.
Okay. Are Chinese customers really different to European customers, or is it a more generational question?
I mean, both. I mean, first of all, absolutely yes. So Chinese consumers and Chinese customers, or if we talk about consumers, I would say are very demanding when it comes to being digital, mobile, on-demand, experiential. So basically what we see in China is a group, in particular in the, let's say, the middle class, the bigger cities, is a group of very demanding and very sophisticated customers that will not be happy with a lot of products that we offer here in Europe anymore. And that's interesting, because that has changed. 20 years ago, it was the other way around. Everything that came from Europe or was a foreign brand, it was a great, high premium. But today, that has changed. It has changed.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to hear. And how do the companies react to that, business model wise and the setup wise and so on? Can you share some observations?
Yeah, so it's a big question, but some simple observations. So as a company, it means that when we talk about customer centricity, which every company is customer centric, obviously, at least in the strategy and in the vision. But the reality is in China that you have to really design not only your product and your service around the user, if you like, so the consumer, the customer, but it also is not only about how you design the product or the business model, it's how you design the organization to allow that. So we see a lot of interesting examples where companies like Haier, this in white goods, they make fridges and so on, or Xiaomi, they make smartphones. Or for that matter, a lot of the other smaller companies, they're really good at making the company so well organized around the user and the customer. So not as a hierarchy with a lot of different departments and a lot of different reporting structures, but really give sort of the responsibility of every employee to be in touch with the customer, with the user. And that creates, I would say, less distance with the user. And that's, I think, is crucial. And it is crucial. And that is something that, in my experience and the research I've been doing, I mean, I've been doing research with literally hundreds of Chinese companies, is what Chinese companies are really good at. So maybe they're maybe not always really good at coming up with the best or the most perfect solution, but they're good at coming up with a solution that satisfies most of the needs of the customer, and they would know that fairly rapidly.
Okay. When you look to the usual suspects in the tech area, like the GAFAs and so on, they normally develop a business model that is valid on a global level. Huh?
Right.
They roll it out on a global scale. The Chinese companies, the big ones that you have looked to, do they have the same approach, or are they more coming from this Chinese environment and try to go step by step?
Well, I think here you touched a very important pain point of a lot of Chinese companies, in particular tech companies. So the ambition certainly is to be a global company and to be the best and the biggest in the whole world. The reality is that their business model is driven by local embeddedness, which basically means that they are really strong in building up local ecosystems that make everything very smooth, work very well together with external partners. However, that advantage also generates a disadvantage. If you're very locally embedded, it's very difficult to create that same level of embeddedness in other ecosystems. And unfortunately, the rest of the world does not look like China. It looks actually very different. So that is a big challenge. That is a big challenge. Yeah.
Maybe look a little bit at data and data gathering. I think China is much ahead of Europe in the sense of using data, customer data, consumer data to customize the products and so on. And maybe also regulation is different, as we know. And How advanced is in your view, the industry there, or the companies in different industries there, compared to Europe or to the Western countries?
So I think when it comes to using data, big data, using artificial intelligence as a tool, using cloud, I think there's, depends a bit on the industry, but I think in a lot of industries, Chinese companies are really very far when it comes to, for instance, understanding what kind of product a customer wants. I'll give a simple example. So there's now something called a spicy Snickers bar in China. How was this developed? It was a very simple product development process where basically company X, and you can imagine which company, that produces Snicker bars, chocolate bars, work together with a local internet company, basically pulling in all the data, saying what would be now a key taste, a new taste that a particular target group wants. It took them only really a couple of weeks to come up with the answer and to build a new product. So I think there's really a lot of solutions available that currently also more and more multinationals in China are using to come up with, I would say, incremental product improvements. So I think there's one area where we see Chinese companies being really, really advanced. Obviously leveraging the fact that A, there's scale, so there's a lot of data, and B, of course, also the fact that at the moment it's still possible to, well, cross the different silos of data pockets that are there. And that's, I think, at the moment still a big advantage. Yeah.
When we look to the buzzword ecosystems, which is much used in our space now, and I think also here the market is much more advanced in the different Asian countries, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how far are they already with developing these ecosystems? How are they built? Is there always one big company in the middle, the spider in the web, or what it's called? Yeah? Or are they more distributed power influence in these networks?
So I mean, a very long story, very short. So I have a whole book on this topic, right? So the short story is like this. Usually you have what we call maybe like a magnet or network orchestrator, which is usually a company or a couple of companies that work together to build up a very strong capability in a certain area. And what you then see is that there's being built out a whole, I would say, kind of a layer of shared services, synergies, offerings, solutions that kind of make you stick to that particular offering in the middle of this network. And what you then see is that those kind of, maybe we call it a glue, this kind of glue then also creates reasons for external partners to work together through this glue with this core of this ecosystem. And at that stage, it's not really anymore like a planned strategy. So in the case of an Alibaba or a Tencent, it's not that they thought about exactly what are we going to do and in which stage and in what way. It is more they create sort of the environment and they orchestrate initiatives, and of course many of them also fail, around, let's say, their core capability and this particular glue that they have. And I think this is a way that, where ecosystems are also different from platforms, because platforms are usually plug and play, so you leverage a certain infrastructure, but in the case of an ecosystem, we talk about interdependencies between the different players in the ecosystem. And Chinese companies have been very advanced in the B2C space, business to consumer, but also in the business to business space to develop these kinds of, I would say, new ways of organizing.
Okay.
So,
no, that's great. Maybe a last question. We have seen in an earlier presentation that the capital is moving from the west to the east. What is moving from the east to the west?
Yes, that's a good question. Well, also capital. I mean, there's increasing investment, especially in the tech sectors, of course, from Chinese companies to, well, any other place in the world. But realistically speaking, we see China's companies going global, nearby China. So we see a lot of developments in Southeast Asia and Japan, nearby markets. We see a lot of developments in the Middle East, in the African continent. We see, of course, the first steps of some of the bigger brands in Europe and the US, but that's I would say still, that is ongoing, but that is not, it's not going to change our landscape immediately. However, what I think is really important to understand is that the ambition of this globalization from, let's say, the Chinese side is certainly there. Okay. And if the developments and the speed of what is happening inside the domestic market is at any stage kind of an indication of what may happen globally, then I think we should pay attention to this. We should pay attention to this.
Okay, so we'll have a close look on that and what will happen, especially from an insurance perspective, but also cross-border and,
Right.
and cross-industry, and
Right.
can have some learnings. And we're really looking forward to your presentation afterwards. Thank you very much,
Excellent.
Mark.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming
Thank
in.
you.